Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this three-part series, we sit down and talk with Deb Dickerson. Deb's a decorated former LAPD officer, tactical flight officer, and pilot. Deb Dickerson thrives on a life filled with challenge and passion. Born and raised in the tight-knit community of Guttenberg, Iowa, with a population of 1,500 people, Deb developed a competitive spirit through sports like softball, basketball, and track. A pivotal moment came in 1984 during a vacation to Los Angeles for the Olympic trials. Setting eyes on the city and experiencing her first airplane flight, Deb fell in love with flying. With unwavering determination, she traded her Midwestern roots for the California sunshine, starting a career in retail while harboring dreams of becoming a pilot. Driven by a desire for service, Deb's path took her to law enforcement. She joined the ranks of the LAPD in the late 1980s, where she became a respected officer. Her diverse career encompassed roles in Hollywood Patrol, Vice, and the MTA Task Force. She even had an opportunity to ghostwrite for the mayor and chief of police. A natural leader, Deb broke barriers as the first female chief tactical flight officer at LAPD Air Support. For 8 years, Deb served as a tactical flight officer. She was then the chief tactical flight officer for 2 years before being selected as a pilot. Witnessing the aftermath of 9/11 firsthand, Deb actively participated in peer counseling efforts. Retirement in 2017 proved short-lived. Missing the thrill of flight, Deb returned to aviation in the Los Angeles basin as a news helicopter pilot. Thank you to our sponsors, Collins Aerospace, Goodrich Hoist and Winch, Garmin, and Precision Aviation Group. Cheers.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Like a third of my time every year was always, if not more, was always in a 206. And I'm like, I'm over this. I'm done. Yeah. Either get rid of the 206s or get rid of the fat asses that you have piloting here. One of the two. It's very simple, but this needs to stop. And then they made me fly it again. And it was during a TFR with then President Obama. And anybody who knows about the temporary flight restrictions, when President Obama was here, they restricted us heavily. Yeah. You know, we had like a absolute no-fly zone. It didn't matter if, 100 people were being massacred in there. They were not going to let us in it. And then there was like moving TFRs, and it was all craziness. And they give us the squawk code, and I'm flying, and I go into LA. I'm squawking discreet, and I do my thing in LA, and I need to go down to the south end. Down to San Pedro, down south of LAX's airspace. LAX says, okay, Air 3 cleared out to the south, squawk VFR. Have a great day. Instinct, he says it, I do it. I push the button, we're going. I get to Compton Airport. I'm like, oh, crap, I put in my discreet. I keep going. I get into Torrance. Torrance gets me up. Air 3, is this you? Yes, it is. You need to land, and you need to land right now. The F-16s have been launched. I'm like, oh, shit. I land, 4PD, the pig, at Torrance, and the F-16s go over. And the tower goes, that was the greatest thing we have ever seen. And I'm like, dude, because you're not piloting. So yeah, it's cool. But now I'm like, oh my God. Literally, I had been off squawk for like 2 minutes. I was going the opposite direction of where the president even was. Yep. LAPD has the greatest working relationship. Thanks a lot to George Gonzalez, with the Secret Service. They were in the station when this happens. And they're like, hey, we know. We'll figure it all out. We know who you are. We know that it was, blah, 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 whatever. And so then I fly back, I sit down, and all people want to say to me is this: why didn't you leave that on 1200, squawking VFR? Why didn't you leave that running on Torrance's flight deck and walk away and let him bomb it? And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Just to get rid of the
aircraft. So yeah. I've had my moments of silliness.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I had forgotten about that, but now it comes right back. Chris Owen had a similar Well, Chris Owen got to see the F-16 fly across in front of him.
Yeah, with those little showing his bombs.
During Reagan's
showing his bombs. I go, hey, look what we got. What you got?
Yeah, look at this. And he was in the right on that as well. It was like, these guys are out of control.
Yes.
We're following all the rules, all the protocols, and F-16s are flying within, very close proximity to our pilots.
We've been through the crazy.
Yes. Let's shift gears to something that's a little bit more serious, but something that you have been a part of in your peer counseling. That's something that's been part of you for a long time, but particularly, and I don't remember the timing of it, but you can talk to that. September 11th rolls around and affects us all, and all of us. Yeah. Affects us in many different ways, but you jumped right in and you ended up in Manhattan.
I did.
After September 11th as a peer counselor to assisting first responders. Talk to us about your peer counseling and particularly the September 11th related peer counseling that you did.
Well, back when I worked PRD, you have to go back to there again. Oh, cornerstone of my existence. I wrote
Who knew?
I wrote the department's policy on domestic violence. So I was like the department expert on domestic violence. And I remember handling a call in Hollywood and ended up in court. And they're like, well, how do you know this? I said, because I wrote the policy. I said, I know exactly. I know about domestic violence. I've studied it in-depthly, whatever. And they're like, oh, the poor defense was like, dang it. Why did we ask her that question? So I become a peer counselor just because I had a friend who called me up, had a gun to her head, said she was going to kill herself. And I'm like, holy crap, what do you say? How do you know what to say so you don't say the wrong thing so they actually follow through with this?
Yeah.
It turned out excellent. She's phenomenal. She's great. She made it through all of that and continued her career on LAPD and is an awesome human. But I was like, I need to figure this out because I don't need this to happen to me again. What am I going to do? So they had a peer counseling program. I applied. I became a peer counselor. You go through a bunch of training, pretty in-depth training where you learn how not to break down, and when you're dealing with somebody, you have to, again, have that calm voice. You have to stay level at all times. And this was before I came to air support. I was a peer counselor. So I'd been a peer counselor for a long time. And then I became a part of the critical incident response team. And they're the ones who go out, especially like when officers are killed in the line of duty, officer commits suicide, whatever it is. We go to the divisions, we talk to them. I used to get phone calls all the time because they put you on a roster. And so I'd get a lot of domestic violence calls or suicidal calls or whatever. And I deal with them. I'd be in my closet at like 2 a.m. talking to somebody, trying to help them through something because that's what you do. You're on call, basically. So 9/11 rolls around. They're sending crews from LAPD to go out and help them. You can only imagine what these officers and firemen and everybody are going through. So they sent the first wave out. And then I went in the second group. I went out there. There were like 8 of us probably that went out. We did a lot with the Port Authority because they were the ones who got hit hard. I was in Hoboken, New Jersey. I love to say Hoboken. I have never had a reception like that from people. I mean, the people of New York, you hear all these horrible things about people from New York. Greatest people ever. So kind, so appreciative. We might have an LAPD something on, a jacket or whatever, a sweatshirt or something. They're like, oh my God, you're here from LAPD? Yes. What are you doing here? You tell them. They'd be like, thank you so much for coming here. Thank you for, trying to help. I spent a lot of time at Ground Zero. This was still in the recovery phase. They were still finding bodies at this point. And I had one of the chaplains from LAPD. He and I kind of like teamed up and we would be there. And you always knew because it got dead quiet and everybody just stood there. So you knew that they had found another victim. So other times you were just walking around talking to the guys, whatever. It didn't even matter if they were sworn, civilian, whatever. And I had a contractor who said, hey, you want me to walk you underneath the buildings? I'm like, okay. Everything there is dust. Everything is pummeled. There's not, you think about how many stories that thing is and all the desks, the pens, the pencils, chairs, everything. There's nothing. There is nothing but, big steel beams and dust. It was the weirdest thing to me. It was like an apocalypse, when you see it on TV, the apocalypse and everything, exactly what it looked like. So he walks us underneath this building and we're walking around and I find a piece of glass. It's in my shadow box. It's behind me. And he's like, we've never found a piece of glass. He goes, take it. He goes, you're not supposed to, but just put it in your pocket and blah, blah, blah. In my pocket, and we're out, or we're continuing. He's explaining what they're doing and how they're doing it and everything. But we met one-on-one with the Port Authority, the firemen. We prayed at ground zero with these guys. We stood shoulder to shoulder with them, bringing victims out. I was in the morgue. It was a lot.
Wow. How did that change you, Deb? I know it changed you.
You promised.
No, I know. That is a powerful moment. And you voluntarily threw yourself into that with others, but you voluntarily threw yourself into that. And we don't have to go any deeper into it. We're not going to. But I'm just going to say thank you for doing that. It's not just the people in Hoboken and New York City that appreciated that. I remember thinking, wow, you're a rock star, Deb. I can't believe you're doing that, because it's so hard. It's emotional. And, but you did it. You did it. You represented all of us in such a great way for such an important thing. We talk about this topic on Hangar Z regularly and how important it is. And, you're amazing. I'm just still so impressed. And that came to mind when we were formulating questions. Boom, I put that on there because it still impacts me that you did that.
Oh, yeah.
And I know how hard it was.
No, I have a box in my closet, and it's got everything. It's got all the pictures. The piece of glass was in until I retired, and I felt that needed to go in there. It's got notes from officers from back there. I never opened it. But
your kids are going to be able to see that and really appreciate what a great mom they have. That was.
I told you not to do this.
No, I can't help it.
No, it's fine.
I can't help it, Deb. No. You did all this stuff. I mean, this is amazing.
No, it was a good experience. It really was. It was.
Yeah, I know it was.
It was an important experience. It was a good experience. I'm glad I had that opportunity. I'm glad that I went. The people I went with were phenomenal. If they asked me to do it again, I'd do it again.
I know you would. I know you would. And you can see how tough it is, and you do it anyway.
I know. How many years has it been? Good grief. Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. Unbelievable. 23 years.
Yeah.
It was a historical moment in our nation's history, and the fact that you stood up and volunteered to go and help in the way that you felt best suited to do that is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And Jack's right. We talk about the topic of mental health as much as we can on the podcast because it's so important. I feel like in our industry, it's really easy to sweep a lot of what you see and do under the rug and pretend like it doesn't affect you. And we know that's not true. So from very early in my career, I had the chance to interact with peer support at San Diego PD. If you're involved in a critical incident, a officer involved shooting, you get assigned a peer supporter right away. And that peer support assignment, that guy sticks with you or girl through the duration of your career. So again, by the name of Chris Wilson was assigned to me, and he was an awesome guy. Walked me through the whole investigation and told me what to expect. And just that by itself, kind of having an understanding of what was going to happen was really nice. I was 3 months in as a police officer, so I had no idea even how to do my job yet.
Oh yeah.
And here I am trying to figure out how to navigate an officer involved shooting.
Yeah. That's tough.
Chris ended up being murdered in the line of duty. It's probably been 10 years now or so, but he would always check in, and it was important for me every time he did. So go to Ontario and had the opportunity to help to kind of develop their peer support program. So I heavily believe in the power of peer support and how it helps folks navigate all these difficult situations that we find ourselves in, whether it's at work or outside of work. So again, I give you a lot of credit for volunteering to make an impact in people's lives, our own lives, our own people, if that's a way you want to put it. But it's difficult, and you're sacrificing time away from your own family and friends and social life to make our industry better through that. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you to our sponsor, Collins Aerospace Goodrich. Whether your mission is saving lives or servicing high-value assets, Collins Aerospace's Goodrich hoists stay ready to assist. Features such as single-point payout reduce the potential for hoist-induced load swings, enhancing overall safety.
I think that any agency, even LAPD, they do not put the emphasis there. They don't. They just don't.
Right.
You know, there's the Wives of the Los Angeles Police Officers group that I belong to. And you listen, I have a different perspective because I was a police officer and I am the wife of one. But you listen to some of these ladies and what they say and how they talk, and you're like, they need their officers need mental help, you know, like not, you know, I mean, like peer counseling, and they're not getting it because you can tell just by what the wives are saying. And the wives are at their wits end. They're like, we don't even know what to do. We're going to end up divorced because, you know, we don't know what to do. And it's just like a stigma or something. People just don't want to address it. Yeah. And you just have to. That's the only way to survive. You have to have venting. Mandy and I have always done one thing. When we would be working, we would get 10 minutes when we were together after work or whatever. We never worked the same shift. But when we have the time, you get 10 minutes to vent. Then you're done with work. We don't talk about work. We don't care about work. Doesn't matter. It's not our life. It doesn't define us. It's not who we are. So we use 10 minutes to vent it and deal with it. And then we move on to whatever else is going on in life. And you have to have some outlet like that, or you're going to end up calling somebody with a gun to your head. That's just the way it is. There's just too much pressure. And the way that the LAPD is set up right now, way too much pressure. You know, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I feel like the more we talk about it, hopefully the more normalized the idea of mental health becomes. And, you know, seeking the help of a peer counselor or a professional counselor is a good thing. It shouldn't be stigmatized, you know. But I like what you bring up, you know, as a married couple, both being in law enforcement, you guys could check in with each other and could kind of open up as to what happened that day. It kind of gives you an idea of, you know, what kind of day that person had, right. You know. So it's hard. I feel like for me, I would typically try and shelter my family from anything that had happened at work that day. I didn't want them to know, but that probably isn't a healthy thing, you know, for them or myself. So I don't think that's probably the best way to deal with it. So I like what you guys did there. That's great.
Oh, my parents for the longest time thought that I was like a meter maid and just wrote tickets to park cars. They didn't know what I did for LAPD because why tell them? Why let them know that? Until they saw me on TV after a double suicide. So it was like, they're like, we just saw you on, you know, CNN. I was like, what? Oh yeah. Yeah. That's what I really do. Sorry. You know.
Yeah. Well, as we wind this down, we still got one big topic to get to here, and that's your short-lived retirement. You eventually retired, and you got away from the biz, you got away from law enforcement, you got away from flying for a little bit, and then something changed, and you decided to jump back in, and came back, and now flying for Helinet with as a electronic news gathering pilot. Tell us about your decision to come back, and tell us about Helinet.
Okay. Well, I decided to retire from LAPD after I had neck surgery. I have a plate and 8 screws in my neck. I had back surgery, shoulder surgery. I had everything. Helicopters are bad. You know, they're hard on your body. That's just a fact of life. My kids are into the age where, you know, I have 3 kids. They're 13 months apart. So it's just like having triplets. And they were to the point where it's like, okay, they're at different schools. They need different pickup times. They, you know, they're getting into sports. And it was just too much to juggle. And it was like, it was so stressful to have to deal with it. So Mandy and I decided that it was a good time for me to go. So I retire, and I think, oh, this is awesome. I love being retired. This is amazing. And I didn't miss LAPD. I missed some of the people, but I missed the flying. The freedom of flying, and I just love to fly. I don't even care. I just love that feeling when you're in the air. It's amazing to me. So I missed that. Captain Perwin, who is the owner of Helinet Aviation, you know, Alan Perwin, of course, started it, and his wife, widow Catherine, now runs it and does a phenomenal job. I've known Catherine for a very long time. She happened to approach Manny and say, "Hey, is Deb still interested in flying?" And Manny's like, "I don't know why." He goes, "You know, if she wants to, we'd love to have her." And I said, "I can't work for full time. I can't do it." She goes, "You don't have to work full time. Part time. You pick and choose when you want to fly, when it works into your schedule with your family." I'm like, "Seriously?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "I'm in." And that's what I do. I work part-time, a few times a month. And when I first started, it was like 3 times a week or so. Slowly, my kids get older. My responsibilities at home get more. So I don't fly as much as I like, but I am an ENG pilot. I'm the only female ENG pilot in the basin for LA, which is very bizarre to me. And it's an interesting thing to me. I loved flying LAPD because I love that adrenaline rush. I love being a part of it. And so now you sit, 1,000 feet above the LAPD helicopters that are in it, and you're just sitting there watching it. It took me a long time to learn to just sit there in an autoground effect hover. I tell people all the time, I am probably one of the worst autoground effect hover people in the world. But you know what? I have great camera operators that make it look good. So that's the good part. I work with some amazing people, and it's an interesting switch over. It's a natural progression, really.
Talk about that natural progression. What skills specifically jump out at you where you are now an ENG pilot and you're going, wow, I'm glad I did this piloting this particular thing with LAPD. What's particular skills do you think are really important in that transition for you?
Knowing the basin. Knowing the LA basin, the airspaces, it's very complex. You get guys that are coming to fly ENG and they're coming from the Canyon or from Vegas or, they've been doing tours or something. And the airspace is very complicated in LA. Yeah. Not as complicated as San Diego, mind you, but it's quite complicated. And I think that experience alone was huge. They'll go, oh, I need to go here. Okay, well, I don't have a TFO as an ENG pilot. I don't have a TFO. The camera operator is usually telling me where we're going, and they give interesting directions. That's what I've learned. And it's like, if I didn't know the general, 100 blocks or whatever, we'd be lost sometimes, I swear. But it's like, no, okay, I know where this is. I know this. I know what airspace I'm going to be into. I know where I need to transition to. I know what the transitions are. I know how to talk to the controllers. I love LAX controllers. And I think it's from my time as a pilot for LAPD. If you know what you want and you just say what you want, they let you do it and they leave you alone. But if you go in there and you're a bumbling idiot, they're going to treat you like a bumbling idiot, and they're probably going to throw you out of the airspace because they don't have time to deal with it. So that I think is a huge benefit to me too. I think being able to do all of that. Now, when you make me go like into Orange County, then I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to learn. That was a learning thing for me, going outside the basin. But in the basin, it was phenomenal. Yeah. Being able to talk to, of course, LAPD, sheriffs, or whoever. I would get inside information all the time from people. They just hit me up on a text or something. Okay, hey, we got this going on. This is what's going. Because hey, in the ENG world, it's all about, as one famous ENG talent, who I can't say his name. I'd love to, but he said while they were streaming, he said, "Our job is to get the shot." And he said it to his pilot, and he was yelling it at him. He's like, our job is to get the shot. That's the only reason we're here, is to get the shot. So that is their mentality. And knowing what I do know helps me to get that shot for them. Kind of understanding how police are working, what their policies and procedures are, what suspects usually do, knowing all of that helps you. Yeah. So that's been no doubt. The hardest thing for me was to learn to just sit there in an autoground effect for hours on end. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. I hate fires. I hate fire season. I hate everything about fire season.
I know you hate fire season.
The other thing is weather. LAPD is very, very mission driven. I'm sorry, they're very, very safety driven. And if it's not safe, they're not going to go. But they will do everything they can to get those cops on the ground. That's a given. But and here's an example. I remember flying LAPD doing orbits, and it was like 50 knot winds coming over the hill, and you're like do really slow, and then all of a sudden that wind hits you and you're 5 blocks south. You are of no use to anybody at this point. You cannot help the officers on the ground. Why are we here? It's not that way with ENG. You will go out in just about anything, and you sit there, put the nose into the wind, and there you are, and you sit there. So they call it LAPD wind. They'll go, okay, are we flying? Is it LAPD wind or is it ENG wind? And it's like,
wow. You sit out there and get beat up for the duration of whatever incident. Probably a fire, I'm guessing, with the winds. If you're flying those winds for a long time, it's got to be a fire.
But, the fire just creates its own weather.
Thank you to our sponsor, Garmin. Now, Bell 505 and Airbus AS350 operators can focus more on the mission while reducing pilot workload with the Garmin GFC 600H flight control system. Think attitude hold, hover assist, stability protection, and more. Details at Garmin.com.
And I've been up close to some of these beasts, and it's phenomenal to look at. I love it. I love to look at that. But up at altitude, the wind isn't bad, But when we've got like those Santa Anas that blow through here, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Let's go look at the cat in the tree. I think that's a great idea. The branch that fell down on somebody's car. Oh, phenomenal. We're not saving babies, and but it's a great gig though. And what else helps me is when I have talent in the front seat. Like right now I play for some phenomenal people. I've flown some of the greatest. I've flown Stu Mandel, Rick Dickard, Scott Reif, Chris Christie, Gabe Santos, all of them. I've flown them all. They are all phenomenal at what they do. They're the talent for these news agencies. But sometimes they don't know. They don't know what speed can you pitch somebody at? Why are they calling off this pursuit? Why are they doing this? Why? I can answer that because I've been there. I've done it. I've experienced. I know their policies and procedures, and I can help them do their job better. You need filler time. I can help them with filler time. When you start filler, and I think that's good for them. They appreciate it. We've got other LAPD pilots that fly at Helinet. We've had quite a few. There's some that fly for some of the other news agencies too. But I think it's just a great transition because what they want to get, the shot that they want is usually police related. It's usually going to have police involved, and having that knowledge is invaluable to them and to me, really.
Wow, that's good. That's good stuff.
Going way back to episode 2 of the Hanger Z podcast, Tim Lynn was the second person we ever interviewed. I love Tim.
I love Tim.
Great guy, and obviously,
Tim is great.
His background in law enforcement really allowed him to do what you do extraordinarily well. And the commentary, I love his commentary he provides on incidents. And in talking to him, you realize, the LA Basin in Southern California in particular is unique because we do work with the media very often. It's not unusual for a pursuit to have a flight of 4, including, 2 news ships and 2 law enforcement ships. Can you give some advice to folks that may not be as familiar or comfortable working with ENG aircraft, for the folks that maybe don't work in a, densely populated area, or for whatever the reason is? It's a very unique thing we have here.
It is. And, when you figure that we usually have, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 news helicopters, sometimes 6 over an incident. And then you've got, if you're with LAPD, you've got a low ship and a high ship. So you've got all this sitting there. The biggest thing that I think the ENG world has done is to meet with these agencies and said, hey, what can we do to work better with you? What can we do so that we can do our job and let you do your job? The most annoying thing, I remember as an LAPD pilot, was having the news media constantly asking you on O2, which is, common frequency. Oh, what's this? What's that? Can you do that? Tell me about this. It's like, dude, I got my hands full right now. I don't need to be telling you what we're doing. It's just, I can't do that. I just can't. And then when you have the opportunity, and this is big, I think, when you have the opportunity, just give the news media what they need. Just give them the basics, whatever you're comfortable giving them. Give them what they want, and they'll leave you alone. Usually. Sometimes they don't, but usually they just leave you alone because now they have what they want. And then if they have another question, they'll say, hey, when you have a second. I think we have a really good working relationship right now between the two. There were some incidents that occurred that brought some things to a halt, and LA, trust me, if LAPD tells LA that they want the news media out, LA will throw them out in a heartbeat. Because first of all, LA doesn't want to deal with all these helicopters. But second of all, if LAPD is telling them this and the respect that they have with LAPD, they know that there's a problem. But we've had, ENG ships fly underneath the low ship of LAPD or the sheriffs or somebody. You've had guys that come head on. You've had so many close calls. Yeah. And again, some of it is, as we spoke about, flying in the basin is different. It just is. When you have to be below 900 feet, when you're in the class Bravo, and you've got 7 helicopters, there's not a lot of space for people to be. So you've got these kids that are coming from, I say kids because I'm old, but you got these kids that are coming from the canyon or Vegas or wherever, and they've been doing med flights or whatever they've been doing, and they don't understand it. They just don't get it, and it takes somebody to teach them how to do it, I think, and explain it all to them. And Helena does a good job when they get new pilots, and throwing them in with a seasoned pilot to get them to that point. I don't know about the other news agencies, how they do their pilots. I have no idea. But it's rare that it's a pilot at Helena that causes an incident or a phone call to be made. It's very rare. I don't even know that I think it's ever happened since I've been there. I've been there I've been there like 6 years now. So,
wow.
Yeah, I've been retired for 7. So
you talk about the partnerships that you create. I think that's the key thing is, if you have a fly-in at your agency or one of the regional fly-ins, invite the ENG crews out so you guys can all be in the same sheet of music and take the opportunity to talk to them, and ask, how can we operate better together? Make the effort to start that line of communication, because that's where things get solved and worked out. You don't want to be solving that over an incident. It's better to talk about it on the ground, over a cup of coffee or a cookie, so I just, I always loved fly-ins for the networking side of things, and it lends to that, so highly recommend doing that for sure.
Well, it's come a long way. Yeah. Deb remembers when the relationship was really not good. I mean, it wasn't a good relationship between the media and law enforcement aircraft. There were certain pilots that were better about it, and then certain ones that were terrible about it. And because of those, incidents, it's come a long way. And now, I've been away from it for a while, but Deb's still in it. It's so much better, so much safer, so much more cooperation. When before it was more almost competing, for airspace than it is now.
I mean, you remember, we won't say who it was, but you remember he lost his license. He lost everything because of doing stupid things to get the shot.
Yep.
And it was so detrimental to the safe operation of any aircraft. It was like,
absolutely,
there is no shot that any news director needs that is worth killing a bunch of people in helicopters. It's just not. It is not.
Yep. Yeah.
So I remember when I first went there, and I was flying Stu Mandel, and I love Stu. I was flying him, and I got information from LAPD. We were over one pursuit. Another one was just kicking off in the Bravo. So we're in the Bravo. We're going down. Anybody familiar with LA Basin, you go down the 110 freeway. We're south of the 105 now. So now you're in Hawthorns. So I had to switch over. Well, the guy came back around and went back north of the 105. All the other news helicopters just went. They never got clearance back into the Bravo, nothing. Me being, okay, I'm going to do everything the right way. I'm trying to get this. So we missed the guy like getting out of the car or something. Apparently that was like a major faux pas. But I was new. I didn't know, but I wasn't going to jeopardize the safe operation of the helicopter and my crew to get somebody getting out of a car. I just wasn't going to do it. I did it the right way, and I stood by it. Later, we debriefed it and we talked about it, and everything is good and great. But you can't give up safety to get the shot. You can't. You just can't.
Right.
I don't care, and it
Good
doesn't
lessons.
matter. I'd rather walk away from flying than do that.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those situations where even if you had gotten that shot, you might have won that particular battle, but you lose the overall war, especially if something bad happens. But when it comes to, having relationships with the tower, if they see you busting their airspace, they're not going to be friendly to you, from the times after you continue to bust their airspace because they know you don't respect them. So having the relationship, they know that you're going to check in and get permission to go into the Bravo before you actually do it is really helpful, and it helps win the overall war, if you want to call it that.
Oh no,
So
yeah.
I commend you for that.
We went. I was flying Scott Rife, the Skylord. I was flying him, and we had to go down into San Diego. We got into, oh my gosh, why can't I think of the airspace down there? Long rifle.
Yeah.
I get into there.
Long rifle at the Marine Corps at Pendleton.
Yes. And the guys going into there, they won't let us go in high because of the low cloud cover. And so we can't, others we have to go 2 miles offshore, and we don't do that. So I accidentally snuck a little bit too far south. And they're like, hey, you got to get out. I'm like, okay, we're getting out, whatever. I called them when I landed. And I said, hey, I want to apologize to you. I am super sorry. I did not mean to infringe in your airspace. And he goes, oh my God. He goes, I have never gotten a phone call from a pilot ever. He goes, thank you. Thank you for, calling and talking to us about this. I said, I was in the wrong. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that I knew it. So he was like, we're good. Don't worry about it. And that builds such a relationship that the next time I come down there, they're going to remember me. They're going to know, that we have this relationship, and maybe they will let me come in lower, or maybe they will do that. You don't know what'll happen, but you don't have to be a jerk about it. You just, kill it. I always say, kill them with kindness and beg for forgiveness. So.
Yeah, next time you come in there, they go, hey, it's Deb.
Yeah.
She called. Remember when she called?
The only female that ever flies around, I guess. No, I'm all about calling.
My favorite tower controller, his name is Brian Gleason. He's been on the podcast. He was a controller at Ontario, and we had a really outstanding relationship. Not just me, but the other folks at our agency. Really law enforcement friendly. His dad was a police officer and a pilot as well. So he'd see my squawk code pop up, and before I could even call into the tower, like, PD8, you're clear for the north, south, and west. I didn't even have to ask for anything. He'd tell me as soon as he saw it pop up. And developing those relationships is not only fun, but it's beneficial for the overall mission, especially when you're doing something critical. So I love that you foster that as well, Deb.
Oh, for sure. The worst words you could ever hear is, when you land, call a tower. You're like, oh.
Yeah, those are terrible
I've never
words.
heard those, but I did.
You cleared a copy of number?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, take this number. Yeah, that's what they say. Can you copy a number?
I was flying the basin, and some airplane pilot wanted to transition through LA. I was flying in the critical. I was down there, and LA's telling him this and that, and the guy's like very confused, and he's not doing anything that the controller's telling him. He goes, I need you to take down a number and call me when you land. The guy goes, I don't have a pen. I'm like, dude, I would scratch it in blood on my arm. I don't know, but I would never tell the controller I don't have a pen. It was like, dude, Google,
That's
whatever.
great.
It's like, oh, God.
Well, Deb, just like with Manny and just like with a lot of our wonderful guests, we could talk for hours, but we can't, because you've got a life to live and and kids to still drive around and manage, and soccer and hockey and all sorts of things. So, John, anything else as we wrap this up?
I would like to ask one more question.
Yeah.
That we didn't get to, and I think because we talked about so many other interesting things, but you look back at your time as a TFO, and especially you guys at LAPD, over so many different interesting incidents. What's probably the most memorable incident that you can recall as being a TFO?
Oh, well, I'm not gonna use Steve Guida, because that will always be, the most memorable to me, but not in a good way. So, I remember flying with I think it was Frank King. Nope, I'm sorry, it was Mike Case, and we are down south of the 10 freeway. And is that a gong? Did you just gong me?
No,
I said Mike Case, and you're like, gong.
Gong.
Gong. Anyway, and we're looking for a suspect with a rifle. Well, I'm like, okay. And I'm like, oh, I got him in the alley. And Mike's like, oh, yeah, sure you do. I'm like, Mike, I got him in the alley, dude. He's like right here. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, bring me around. And he's bringing me around. And I look down, and I'm like, he's got the rifle. He's underneath the street light. I'm like, oh, holy crap. He just blew his head off. I was like, holy crap.
Oh.
At what point do you ever actually see something like that? But whatever reason, this guy decided to do what he wanted to do. And Mike was like, no, he didn't. I'm like, oh, Mike, I just made that up. I was like, no. But,
Yeah.
when you see something
Wow.
tragic like that, I think it just is so in your brain that you just can't get rid of that. We've seen some crazy
hard.
things, pursuits that weird things happen. People sit on the top of a car in a pursuit. And I remember doing street racing, and Lou Peak and I would turn our lights out and sit really high, and we'd watch a couple of races. And then the next one we go, okay, the next race, we're going to take the winner, which means that's the person who's going to get the ticket. So we'd watch 3 or 4 races, and then the next one, and we swoop in, and then they're like cockroaches and they go everywhere. But we did a lot of fun things, and I loved my time at Air Sport, and I have no regrets from being there. Everything was beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now Helenet.
Very
Helenet's
cool.
a great
Yeah,
place to work. I love Helenet. Catherine's a great person to work for.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't ask for anything better in either one of my careers, my full-time one or my new part-time one. So it's been beautiful.
Best of both worlds.
Although this will be my last statement to you guys. People always ask me, who's a better pilot, you or Manny? I'm like, people ask it all the time too. It is funny. I mean, even today, when people find out what we do or have done, and I always say, Manny is a better pilot than me. I said, I'm just a lot more fun. And they're always like, okay. So
That's good. That's good. Being fun's a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thanks for going down that last rabbit hole. We see so many interesting things throughout the course of our career, and you're continuing to see that in the ENG world. So it's kind of fun to think through those things that we've been a part of and dig some of that out. So I appreciate that. And before Jack closes out, I'll hop in and just say thank you again for joining us. Thank you for the groundwork you've laid for, law enforcement aviation in the country and internationally as well through the aircrew course. That's a big deal. And then of course the time you've spent in Pierceport impacted a lot of people there as well. So you're a doer, that's for sure. A lot of people talk about doing things, and you're somebody who actually makes effort and does things. That's impressive.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. Thank you.
Well, it's true and obvious through all the things you've been a part of. But thank you, and look forward to meeting you and Manny in person for a real drink of the day, not a virtual drink of the day.
Well, Deb, thanks a lot for taking the time and joining us. This means a lot to both of us, and I was really looking forward to this for a lot of reasons. Deb and I've known each other a long time, and a lot of the good, bad, and ugly at Air Support we went through together. But I will tell our listeners that Deb was a top tier tactical flight officer, and I don't take that lightly. People ask me all the time, who are the best TFOs? Well, her name's on that short list. Deb was gifted at the TFO position. And in addition to that, I will tell you that as a new pilot, there was no one better to have as a TFO than Deb to teach me as a pilot how to do my job. And I'm not kidding you. When people talk about doing orbits, for instance, that's an art. Doing a law enforcement orbit is an art. And you know who teaches you to do that? Not a flight instructor, a good TFO that's willing to tell you the truth. Deb is not scared to tell you the truth, and especially with me. I credit Deb completely with teaching me how to be a better law enforcement pilot, especially when it came to orbits, because she was honest and she was knowledgeable and experienced, and I applied the things that she would tell me, and I got better. And I always credit her for that and thank her for that. But to the TFOs out there, if there's something not going right and you need the pilot to do something, tell them. Tell them. That's how they're going to learn. They don't learn how to do law enforcement orbits at flight school. And I'll just close by saying Deb's got a fascinating background, and I hope that our listeners really enjoyed learning more about her background leading up to the aviation side of it and the police work side of it, and now the ENG side. So Deb, thanks for your friendship. Thanks for coming on. And I look forward to seeing you real soon too.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
With that, thanks, Deb. So John, we'll wrap it, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. And thanks to our listeners and our sponsors for making this happen. This was a great one. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers.
This is the end of our 3-part conversation with Deb Dickerson. Stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Collins Aerospace Goodrich. Whether your mission is saving lives or servicing high-value assets, Collins Aerospace's Goodrich hoists stay ready to assist. Features such as single-point payout reduce the potential for hoist-induced load swings, enhancing overall safety. Thank you to our sponsor, Garmin. Now, Bell 505 and Airbus AS350 operators can focus more on the mission while reducing pilot workload with the Garmin GFC 600H flight control system. Think attitude hold, hover assist, stability protection, and more. Details at Garmin.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Thanks for hanging out to hear from the sponsors who make these podcasts possible. I wanted to take a minute to highlight an upcoming episode series of the Hangar Z podcast. We sought out some of the world's best airborne law enforcement tactics instructors who also happen to be co-hosts on the Hangar Z podcast. In this series, we discuss everything training. For this series, Jeff Rakovich and I sit down with Jack Shanley, Clay Lacey, and Nick Meeks. This is definitely an episode series you won't want to miss.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.